I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. Welcome to another Monday. We are here for our dry firing episode. You guys have hit us with tons and tons of questions about dry firing, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. So we're going to try to answer some of those questions, and we're going to go over some of the things that will enhance your dry firing experience and increase your level of training. Now, first of all, what is dry firing? Dry firing is a simple act of going through the firing process to include pulling the trigger and working the action without actually using live ammunition. Dry firing can be done pretty much anywhere that you have the opportunity to get down behind a rifle. Now, the key point of dry firing is we are not expending live ammunition, so it is really the cheapest training that you're going to get. People have shown that in order to make a physical skill automatic, it takes thousands and thousands and thousands of repetitions. Dry firing gives you those repetitions without burning costly match ammo. I mean, face it, we're not made of money. Ammunition prices just keep going up. So you have to find ways to train cheaply to increase your skill level. Plus, a lot of us live quite a distance away from ranges, so you can't have the opportunity every day to pack your stuff up and head out to the range for a couple of hours. But most of us have 15, 20, 30 minutes out of the day where you can grab the rifle out of the safe, you can clear it out, you can get down behind it, and you can get some trigger time right at home. If you have a private office at work, maybe even you have an opportunity to do it at work on your lunch hour. Make sure you check with your company policies though before you try that. Now, what can we do to aid you in your dry firing process? The key item that you need in order to dry fire is obviously your rifle. Now, you want your rifle set up exactly the way it is when you go shoot it at a match. You want everything in the same position, all the controls set up the same, you want the stock set up the same. Don't change anything, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to set that feel and that skill on automatic. You're trying to get it ingrained in those mental pathways so that when you drop down behind the rifle, everything feels right, it feels normal, and you go on automatic. So the rifle is really the only piece of equipment that you absolutely need. However, if you usually use support gear like a rear bag, a shooting mat, that kind of stuff, make sure you utilize that as well during the training process. Now that brings me to our next point that we get gobs and gobs of questions on, and that is snap caps or dummy rounds. Somewhere at some point in time there was a myth floating around that pulling the trigger on an empty chamber can damage your rifle. This holds true for quite a few rimfire rifles, 22, 17 HMR, those kind of rifles where the firing pin strikes the rim of the case to set it off. In some of those rifles, if the firing pin falls on an empty chamber, then the firing pin will actually strike the rim of the chamber or the rim of the breech face, and it can cause damage to the breech face and it can cause damage to the firing pin. I have an older Remington 518 that is that way. If you fire it on an empty chamber, you'll peen the edge of the chamber and you'll eventually cause a problem where not only will you not be able to load cartridges into it, but you can also damage the firing pin itself. These are not rimfire rifles. They are not 22s. These are centerfire rifles. The firing pin falls in the center of the chamber. It doesn't strike anything around the outside edge. So when you pull the trigger on an empty chamber, all that's happening is that firing pin is falling on dead air. Centerfire rifles are built robustly enough that you're not going to damage them shooting on a dry or on an empty chamber. Now, that's not to say that there aren't some antique centerfires out there somewhere that this is a bad idea, but I can tell you from personal experience, Remington 700, Savage Model 10, Savage Model 110, Accuracy International, TRGs, Tikkas, the list goes on and on and on. Almost every rifle that I have seen on a tactical rifle firing line is perfectly fine to dry fire. If you're in doubt, contact the manufacturer and they'll be able to tell you. But you're pretty much good to go. So why do we need dummy rounds or snap caps? Well, when you run this bolt on an empty chamber, it's nice and smooth. There's really no resistance whatsoever. So when you get into the habit of running that and not feeling any resistance, and then you go to fire for real and you go to slam that bolt forward and you catch a cartridge, the bolt is going to feel completely different. When we dry fire, we're trying to mimic the entire situation, the entire feel of the rifle as closely as possible. That way, when you go to do it for real, everything feels right. So, loading dummy rounds into your magazine allows you to get used to that drag when you run the bolt forward and you chamber a cartridge. Also, some rifles, depending upon the headspace and depending upon the bolt design, they will feel differently when you lock the bolt down if it's a dummy cartridge in there or if it's an empty chamber. So, especially when you're doing speed drills, you want to run dummy rounds. That way you get used to running the bolt fast while you're loading cartridges. Now, the drawback of using dummy rounds or snap caps is you now have to go run down, pick them up, reload them into the magazine, and that detracts from exactly what you have going on if you're practicing something like trigger manipulation. Now, it's not a drawback if you're actually wanting to practice loading your magazine, because loading these magazines fast and under pressure is a physical skill that you want to ingrain. So loading the cartridges over and over again in the magazine will turn that skill into an automatic skill to where you can just grab a handful of cartridges. You can be talking to a guy, you can be watching downrange and loading your magazine, not thinking about it. So bear that in mind. Now, for me, if I'm doing rapid bolt manipulation drills, I use dummy rounds or snap caps. If I'm just practicing my trigger, then I'll do my trigger press, go through my follow through, then I'll lift the bolt slowly, run the bolt to the rear slowly, forward slowly, and lock it back down, all nice and slow and smooth. In that case, the only thing that I'm doing is I'm attempting to reset the trigger, but I'm also going through the full range of bolt motion. Now, on something like the Remington 700, once you drop that sear, you can just lift the bolt and close the bolt again. I didn't get it all the way up that time. Lift the bolt and close the bolt to reset that trigger. Now you're ready to go again. So that is possible to just press the trigger and lift and close the bolt. The problem is you are now ingraining into those mental pathways to press the trigger, lift the bolt, and close the bolt. So what do you think you're going to do when you get on that live fire line? You're going to pull the trigger, lift the bolt, close the bolt, and you're still going to have an empty cartridge or an empty case inside your chamber. So make sure that as we're going through this, you're not doing anything that you would not want to do on the live fire line. So anytime you run the bolt, make sure you lift it completely, pull it totally to the end of its travel till you hit that stop, run it forward, and close it again. That way, that motion is becoming automatic. You're learning to always run the bolt all the way back to the rearward end of its travel and run it forward and lock it down. Now, these that I have right here are dummy rounds from Remington. I got these when I went to a Remington Armors course. They are basically a standard Remington case, just like you would load for your ammunition, but they have a soft point bullet on them and they have a really hard crimp to hold that bullet in. Now, after thousands and thousands of repetitions, again, I can't speak today, I don't know what it is, thousands of repetitions, the bullets have gotten a little bit loose in here. That's why you want the really heavy crimp, because you're hitting that bullet at an angle when you're driving it up the feed ramp over and over and over again. Your average cartridge that you load to fire in your rifle is only going to have to make that trip out of the magazine and up the feed ramp once before it goes down range. At most, it may be 3 or 4 times if you're doing something where you need to load and unload before you end up burning that round. With these, it's important that the bullet's crimped in because it will go through thousands and thousands of repetitions before the case is too dinged up to continue to use. Now on the back here, there is no primer. It's just an empty primer pocket. This makes them very quick to physically identify. I can pick these up and I can touch the back of them and I can feel that there's no primer in it. There's nothing there. That's nice because even if this cartridge was loaded with powder, without a primer, there's no possibility of it firing in the rifle. Now, obviously you can shake it and you don't hear any powder rattling around in it. That's not 100% because you can get 100% fill with powder in a case and it won't rattle when you shake it. So that's not a perfect check, but it all goes together in making sure that this is not a live cartridge. Finally, these cases are kind of an olive color. No cartridges I use, no live cartridges I use in this rifle look like this. Everything that I use has brass or nickel cases, so I know that these nasty, scratched up, black looking cases are my dummy rounds. Every time I get ready to use these, I physically and visually verify every single cartridge to make sure that they are not live. Over here, these little purple ones, these are A-Zoom snap caps. These are actually the commercial ones that you buy in Gander or any of your sporting goods stores. They are turned aluminum and they have a little rubber stopper right here in the back where the primer is. So your firing pin has something to hit against. So those of you guys that are still not convinced that you can fire these rifles on an empty chamber, these are a good option because they actually give you something for the firing pin to hit against. As I said, these are machined aluminum. Stay away from plastic ones. Plastic ones will break and fall apart and they're just horrible. I've used plastic snap caps before and they just, I'm talking about the clear plastic ones with the little spring and the plunger in the back of them. They will break after a while. If you've got hard plastic snap caps, I've seen them for 223. I've not seen them for 308. But if you have those, they're good to go. You can use them until you break the cartridge rim off of them. That usually is what kills the plastic ones, is you'll break the rim off and they'll be done. Now, if you're set up for reloading, you can make your own dummy rounds. It's just a simple matter of seating a bullet in a resized case and crimping it tightly, but you want to make sure that that case is resized to minimum SAAMI dimensions. That way it fits in whatever rifle you happen to be training with. It also provides minimum amount of wear on your chamber since you're not trying to force that thing into the chamber. Also, you want to do something to differentiate those from your regular reloads, because I know you guys probably are not going to want to go out and buy a box of 100 bullets that you're never actually going to shoot just so you can make up 20 snap caps or 20 dummy rounds. So if you use your standard bullets that you'll use in your match loads, do something to differentiate those. You can get brass black and paint the cases with brass black. That will make them look totally different. You can even go get some Sharpies, get a Sharpie and color those cases in. Do not seat a primer in the case. If you want to make up something close to the A-Zoom caps, then you can squirt some RTV sealant in that primer pocket and then wipe it off smooth, and that'll give you a nice little rubber spot for the firing pin to hit against. But whatever you do, do not put a primer in there. Don't put a fired primer in there. Don't put a live primer in there, obviously. But don't put a fired primer in there because it's too easy to get those mixed up with a case that's had a light strike and get one in there. So whatever you do, make sure that you can physically and visually identify those dummy rounds as different from your match ammunition, and you know that they are not live rounds. Now, once we've got the rifle and the dummy rounds, you need a target to aim at. Unfortunately, with high magnification rifle scopes, you're generally limited on the close distance that you can focus these scopes on. When you dry fire, you really want a sharp, in-focus point to aim at when you're firing, because the whole purpose of dry firing when you're pressing that trigger is to make sure that your sights don't jump off target. If you've got a big blurry target, it's going to be very difficult to see if the rifle jumps off target. So you will want to pick a target at distance. A couple of considerations. First of all, whatever you aim at, you want to make sure that it can stop a bullet. We are still utilizing all of our fundamental safety rules with the rifle, so you're never going to point at anything you don't intend to shoot. I realize that technically we are not intending to shoot because we're dry firing. However, you want to make sure that if a bullet does go down range, that it's going to be stopped by whatever you're aiming at, and it's not going to continue on and pose a threat to some innocent bystander. never, ever, ever dry fire at a live target. It's just not necessary. It's just totally irresponsible. Don't do it. I've heard some really, really stupid stuff from people that are supposed to be highly trained. Do not, under any circumstances, dry fire a rifle at a live target. Don't do it at your dog. Don't do it at the neighborhood cat. Don't do it at squirrels in the tree. Don't do it at that deer down the way. Because if something happens and you drop that animal, now you have to deal with the consequences. So don't do it. Inanimate objects only, and something that will stop a bullet. Now, if you live inside city limits or you live in an area where laying outside or pointing a rifle is not going to be a good thing for you, then there is an option to allow you to train inside your house. Chuck Neller makes these nifty little deals called the Indoor Optical Training Aid, or IOTA. What the IOTA is it is a Butler Creek flip-up scope cap with an additional lens mounted on the inside. This just slides on to the objective lens of your rifle, and it now reduces your focus distance from whatever your scope was at previously down to about 11 foot. Now, most of us, even if we're traveling inside a hotel room, can find a spot where we can train to 11 feet. So it is a great, great aid. Once you get the magnification and the parallax dialed in, or your side focus dialed in, you may have to adjust your distance. They recommend to do it in 3-inch increments. It only takes a very little bit to fine-tune that and really get a nice sharp sight picture. So it is a great option. Now, one of the drawbacks of the IOTA is because you now are looking through an extra lens and you're actually looking through a smaller diameter objective, you lose some of your light transmission. What you need to do to combat that is make sure that your target is brightly lit. If you're using something, say an index card, take a little ballpoint pen and put you a dot in the middle of the index card, and then sit that index card in sunlight, sit it underneath a lamp, shine a flashlight on it, etc. That is probably about the cheapest and easiest way that I've found to be able to use the Indoor Optical Training Aid at close range. Now, other options, if you have a smartphone, because the screens are backlit, you can display a target picture on your smartphone, on your Android device, on your tablet, or even on your laptop computer screen. And that will give you something great to aim at. Now, a word of caution on this, you want to make sure that the screen is a fairly high resolution screen because you are looking through a magnified optic at a small dot. So if you are not utilizing a high definition screen, then you're going to see all the little tiny pixels in that screen. But the Indoor Optical Training Aid is a great, great item to have if you're in a confined space like an apartment, a hotel room, or just you have a small house and you don't have room to stretch out. Now, an additional excellent training aid that I found is a product called Hide on the Range. This is a web or iOS or Android app that was produced by a gentleman that goes by the handle of Mr. Ouchie on Sniper's Hide. And what this is it has different scenarios on it that allow targets to come up. Either you can fix the targets, they can come up statically and you've got plenty of time to shoot at them, or you can set it as time-based to where the targets have a limited exposure. I believe there are multiple targets, and there's also a moving target stage. So if you run that on a laptop or on an iPad or an Android device, it really gives you another dimension to your training, something that may be a little bit more exciting than just laying down, clicking away at a static target. So we'll leave a link to where you can find out more about that in the description down below, as well as a link on how to contact Chuck Neller and get yourself one of these excellent indoor optical training aids. Now, that's about it for the gadgets and goodies for dry firing training. Dry firing training can be as boring or as exciting as you want. You don't need to just keep your routine to where, oh, I'm going to lay down behind the rifle and for the next 30 minutes I'm going to press the trigger. Because if your mind wanders and you're not focused on the task at hand, then you're not going to get the most out of the training. You can do all kinds of stuff from positional shooting to time drills where you have to drop down behind the rifle, load your dummy rounds, and get a shot off. So pretty much anything that you would do on a live firing line, you can do in your dry fire training scenario. The only thing that you're really limited to are the targets downrange that you're shooting at. You can add into it having to traverse and dial on different elevation. You can set up multiple targets in your field of view so that you have to go from one to the other and practice running the stock back and forth and transitioning back and forth. So really, as I said, there's a wide array of things that you can do in your dry firing training. I would challenge you to strive to dry fire at least 3 to 4 times a week. If you can dry fire every day, that will be even better. But stop when you find yourself getting bored, your attention wandering. Just get up, either walk away or put the rifle away. Now, safety is always paramount when we're working with firearms. So if you take a break, you get up and you walk away. When you come back, physically and visually verify everything. Your ammunition, make sure you open that bolt, make sure you use your little peepers and look at the magazine, look in the chamber, take your little piggy finger, jam it down in the chamber. Make sure that it's clear. Make sure those little gremlins didn't crawl out from underneath your couch and drop a live round into your rifle. It sounds stupid, and everybody sits and thinks in the back of their mind, I'm better than that, I know better than that, but mistakes happen when we assume, and mistakes with firearms can kill people. So, make sure you obey the safety rules, make sure you take every extra step. Make sure when you get ready to dry fire that you advise your family what you're getting ready to do. You don't want your little ones running around the corner right into the muzzle of a rifle. You don't want your wife to come around the corner and be staring down the barrel of your rifle. It's really not good for domestic relations, so make sure you convey to them what's going on. Make sure that you are aware that your children may not understand the gravity of what you're doing. So take that time to explain to them. If you have children that are still too young to go to the range and shoot with you, this is an extremely valuable time to explain to them what they're doing and to pique their interest in firearms. I still have one that is too young to go to the range and actually shoot with me, so my dry firing time is great time for me to interact with him with firearms. From the time that he was a toddler, he used to sit next to me, and as I would shoot the rifle when I eject the dummy rounds, he would grab the dummy rounds and bring them back over to me. He absolutely loved it. It was one of his favorite games. In fact, he loved it so much that it got to the point where anytime I took a rifle out of the safe and verified that it was clear, he would come running because he thought it was playtime. So take those moments, they're extremely valuable, and use them to teach your children about firearms and about firearm safety. That's about all we have for this episode. As always, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you click that thumbs up button. If you've got a comment, leave it in the comment section below or send it to us on Facebook or Twitter. We are getting ready to roll back into the regular question and answer format, so please make sure you load us up with questions in the comment section below. We figured out the easiest way to do this is if you leave comments down below in the comment section, then I only have one spot that I have to look to try to pull the questions together and get them ready for the show. I'm not going to throw them out if you send them to us on Facebook or Twitter or Sniper's Hide or AR15.com or any of the other places you see me, but it's just easier for me just to run down through the comments and collect questions for next week's show. If you're a subscriber, thank you very much. If you're not a subscriber, what are you waiting for? We've been going on this for 32 episodes now? Subscribe already. It helps us out, it helps our numbers, and it allows YouTube to let you know when we release a new episode. So please go ahead and click that link and subscribe. Until next week, get out and dry fire.